Hey guys, I'm Noah from the Stock Market Nerds and I'm the value investor. In the last video, I showed you the first steps in telling a story about a company, and I also told you why that is so important. In this video, I will talk a little bit about how big events like the presidential election or the financial crisis can affect the value of a company. So, as you may have noticed, presidential election is going on in America. At least we here in Europe noticed that. And now there are a lot of talks about how the presidential election will affect the stock market. And today I want to give you my 5 cents about that, because we as value investors don't really care about the short-term movements in the stock market. We care about value. And so the question we have to ask is if the presidential election can change the value of companies. And the answer is yes and no. So the presidential election can change the value of companies, but oftentimes it doesn't, and oftentimes it doesn't really matter which candidate wins the presidential election. So in the first videos I always talked about stories, and that's because the value of a company is dependent on the story that you have about that company. And so maybe you've already guessed how presidential election can change the value of a company. And that is by changing our story about that company. So in the first video I showed you my story about Snapchat. And I told you a little bit how Snapchat can be worth 20 billion also if it's making losses today. And the question I have to ask now is if presidential election will change my story about Snapchat. First of all, the outcome of the presidential election, so if Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump is elected, won't change my value in any way, because people will send stuff on Snapchat if Trump is elected, and they will send stuff on Snapchat if Hillary is elected. So that doesn't really matter. When the presidential election really starts to matter is when they start doing things and making actions like improving the healthcare system, raising or lowering taxes, or building walls between countries. So if they would improve the healthcare system, or they would build a wall, or more or less Trump would build a wall, then this wouldn't affect the value of Snapchat in any way. Because as I said, people would send stuff on Snapchat when the healthcare system is improved and when there are walls built in America. So that doesn't matter. Where it could matter, for example, is when one of the candidates does lower or raise the taxes. Because if Snapchat has to pay more taxes, I as an investor get less money, and so the value does decrease. If they lower taxes, the opposite is the case. But then the question is to ask, does it really matter which president is elected? Because if Trump or Hillary want to change something with the tax code, they have to go to the Congress. And I think that the Congress really decides what will happen to taxes. And so I don't think there's a big difference between Hillary and Trump and their changes to the tax code. And so the outcome of the presidential election won't make any different changes to the value of Snapchat. So yes, it can affect the value of Snapchat, but it doesn't have to. But then there are of course companies which are affected by more things than just taxes. For example, a healthcare company could of course be affected by healthcare changes in America. But then I think we as value investors shouldn't speculate about which president could do which changes to which programs and so on and so forth. Because here in Germany we have the saying könnte, hätte, Fahrradkette, which literally means that you shouldn't care about what could happen and what will maybe happen because you just don't know it and it does not make sense to think about it. But what I told you does not only matter in terms of the presidential election, but also in other events like also short-term things like quarterly earnings releases or hot news about companies. So, for example, in America, every company has to publish a quarterly earnings report. Every quarter, that means 4 times a year. And a lot of investors and speculators give a lot of weight to those earnings reports. And if, for example, the earnings declined in one quarter, they often start selling the stock or grading it down or something. But we as value investors should always just ask one question, and that is if such things will affect our story and the value of the company. And if there is a decline in earnings one quarter in a year, this will almost never affect the story of a company. And so also if there are hot news and new informations and big things going on and everyone behaves hysterically in the stock market, it's often just better to cool down and to ask only one question, and that is if the hot news, the big event will affect our story and our value of the company. Because often it's really better to sit and earn than to run and burn cash. That said, I hope you were able to learn a lot in this video and to get new ideas for you. And really try to cool a little bit down when there is everyone panic and everyone is talking about things. It's often better to just relax and do nothing, really. And so, I hope you enjoyed the video and I'm looking forward to speaking to you again. If you liked the video, please leave a comment, a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you didn't like it, please send the video to someone whom you totally dislike. So, see you next time and always remember, Umsatz kommt von Umsetzung.